welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and this is the show where we can put our experts to task answering your questions. And joining me today is James Gostelow, founder of Wayout Property Group, Redevelopment and Refurbishment Specialist. Welcome.
Thank you.
That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? And joining James is Ben Richards, founder of Aura Homes, residential architecture and interior design expert. Welcome to you.
Hello.
I think I'm going to ask you both to cut down your descriptions. It's a bit of a mouthful. But anyway, let's get on with the questioning. And James, in the past, when property prices pass affordable levels and financing becomes difficult, it's often the case that people will renovate, extend and refurbish instead of moving. Is that still the current trend?
Yeah, I would say so. I think people tend, if they've got, especially if they've got children, you know, the upheaval of having to move from the area potentially or schools, they'll then look at redesigning their home. To move, it's the cost, you've got stamp duty on top, and just trying to find that house as well that ticks every box is
within a certain area for your schools, as you mentioned. Yeah,
I would say so. So if it was me, we tend to get a lot of clients in that where they want to spend money on redeveloping their house rather than having to move and having the move costs, whereas they might then want to spend money on refurbishing that house as well.
I mean, the in and out costs these days of moving is quite a lot, isn't it? You've got estate agent fees if you've got a house, which in London over £1 million is nothing exceptional these days. But you know, you can be talking sort of £30,000-40,000 in stamp duty. You could be talking the same in terms of agency fees for selling your home. Then you have, as you say, got all the upheaval of moving, which again with movers and that sort of thing is not inexpensive.
And even then you might not find the exact house that you want, whereas refurbishing and extending, you can kind of
if you're paying 30, 40, 50,000 pounds in stamp duty, for instance, you can do quite a lot, I would think, with the internals of a house to make it more attractive or adjust it to your latest style of living, as it were.
It's also the stress of moving as well, I would say. You know, especially if you're in a chain, you know, if the system here is that anyone could pull out at the last minute.
And it collapses the whole thing.
And it collapses the whole thing. But I think if you want to stay where you are living and you like it there, you've got good neighbours, you've got a good community around you, then it makes better sense to redesign and refurbish your house. Refurbishing your house isn't obviously, well, I don't know what you think, but it's still quite stressful to go through that process. There's all time constraints and things like that. But if you're mindful of that, then I would say, these days people do like to tend to.
I suppose it's very easy for people who can afford to move out, rent somewhere for a few weeks or a couple of months while their house is being refurbished, but not everybody's in that fortunate position, are they?
No, I mean, if you're doing extensive works, you could have to move out for 9 months to a year, you know, whilst the works are happening, and that again has, you know, upheaval issues, but it's far better than the alternative, which is trying to stay and live in a house with the noise and the dust, and some of our clients do ask to do that, and I wholeheartedly warn them that it's not for the faint-hearted.
We wouldn't do it. I've said.
Do you know one of the most common mistakes in property development is people forget about time. They forget that if you have a 2-month planning delay, that's 2 months interest extra you've got to pay. You've got to keep contractors in line for that extra 2 months and all the rest of it. Does the same thing happen with refurbishment? Do people ignore the time factor when they're thinking of doing these works?
I would say so, yeah. I think from when we're working with clients, day one, on the outset, we'll say, look, these are the timelines that we'll be working within. But again, our hands are held because we're working closely with the councils and then with planning and things like that. So from day one, you've got to be realistic and give rough timeframes. And you may then have to have that conversation with a client to say, look, we've overrun because we found this needs doing. But I think key communication from day one is
Nothing ever moves backwards, no forwards. It always moves out.
Yeah. People always sort of overlook the intricacies of what you're doing. I mean, you know, you can even in certain boroughs, you could wait a month to get permission to put a skip outside to take the debris that you've created with your refurbishment, and it's that kind of simple thing that people don't cost into the job, whether it be that in terms of money or whether it's just mental stress, I suppose.
If I'm honest, the biggest delays often are the neighbours, not necessarily the council. So when you're looking at getting party wall awards and potentially scaffold licences and things like that on neighbouring land, that can be the most challenging, especially if your neighbours, you know, just don't want it to happen and don't want the noise and disruption, and they play difficult. Yeah.
And that can be costly. So for us, if we're buying our own properties and we're, say, for instance, on a bridging loan, then 6 months of sitting there as an asset waiting for your neighbours to sign that party wall agreement is, again, relatively stressful.
And you don't get to choose their surveyor. So if they want to bring in a third-party surveyor, they can just get the most expensive structural engineer and party wall surveyor they want, and you're obliged to pay it.
Well, until we did a couple of programmes on party wall with a couple of experts, and in fact, Casey now, who's the party wall council, I just never realised it was that complicated, and the tricks that they use for slowing things down or whatever on the other side are just amazing. You can, I mean, that could be a substantial bill in itself, can't it? Just to get neighbourly agreement. And I suppose if you've got waste coming out with skips and you've got noise, very, very difficult. I mean, although you say, well, I'll restrict the noise to daytime, you know, sort of 9 till 5. Well, that's all right, but I work from home, so it's still disturbing me, you know. I don't know how you cope with all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's an awful lot of planning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot of red tape to go through, a lot of people to satisfy, third parties that you've got no control of as well, which is sometimes the most frustrating thing when you get feedback and things that just are nonsensical and just you can't get your head around.
People are dealing with their emotions rather than you know, a commercial view of things, aren't they? I mean, and I suppose to a degree, why should they? They're just living their life next door. They just
it's a huge challenge.
Peaceful existence. Okay, thank you for that, James. Ben, ahead of the government's proposed changes to planning regulations, what changes would the panel like to see implemented?
Yeah, I think I touched on this on another episode with the operational side of things. I think there's policy changes that can help, but fundamentally, if they don't have the staffing and the resource to deliver on that, then it's kind of pointless. I would like to see, you know, there's been a lot of talk about new towns. I think that has merits, and things like Milton Keynes has been a good example of that over the past years. But when that's a lot of money, that's a lot of new infrastructure, whereas there are a lot of more urban locations where infrastructure is already in place that are probably more lower hanging fruit to start building more densely populated areas. So I think at the moment the decision making and the planning process itself is the key bottleneck for delivering more homes.
What about parish councils?
Parish councils are a waste of time, if I'm honest. I think I've said before.
But that's 3 or 4 months to the process.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to parish council. I've been to planning committees in the past where you know, one of the 12 committee members is asleep. You know, just dozing off in the middle of the committee. You know, not listening, not really understanding what's going on. Often the average age is probably 60 plus and got nothing else to do with their time. They're not professionals in the industry, and that is a very, very difficult process to go through when we need more houses and it's being
it's a dangerous process, isn't it? Because you're allowing lay people to overturn the professional's choice.
Yeah, and it becomes extremely emotional. You know, often it's all down to how much car parking there is, and we need more car parking. And sometimes, you know, that's not the government incentive. They want car-free developments in certain areas, and there's a lot of emotional responses to planning committees without really a lot of substance. So that process does need to change as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. I mean, I think once you get past parish level, I personally think that the parish level ought to be just a consultation paper that they send in when they're copied with the application, perhaps, and keep them away from the developer or the constructor, whoever. I think it should go straight to the planning officer as another consideration, if you like. I mean, they are the people that live in that particular area. I wouldn't want to take that away from them. But I think it's very dangerous when lay people can overturn the professionals. I just think it becomes
extremely political, and that's really not what we need. We don't need more political red tape in the way. It needs to be more objective and less subjective and under people's kind of individual wants and needs.
I'm just interested to know: do you find the London boroughs more compliant and helpful, or do you find the ones on the sort of outskirts of London and throughout the home counties sort of more difficult?
Good question. I think it's always a challenge whichever area you're in.
Every council,
just a different challenge.
Yeah.
Just a different challenge. Yeah,
they all have their different nuances, different different people to please, different processes. There's no real conformity around that. It's each council is its own beast.
Sounds very dangerous. It's very dangerous. Okay, well, that's all we've got time in this half of the show, so join me again after the break when I'll be asking James and Ben more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time, and I'm joined by James Gostelow and Ben Richards. Welcome back, guys.
Hello.
James, what in the expert's opinion is the most important room in the house in so much as that it would help its sale?
Well, for me, I would say the kitchen, dining space, because of if you've got children, you can watch them whilst you're cooking, and also just for entertaining as well. We tend to be asked now to put in bars for our clients, and we do the same for our developments, just so you've got that social space and that nice openness of a good social space to
But
enjoy.
at one time it was so crass to have a bar, wasn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, just,
full circle.
Oh dear.
Yeah, you just think of some dirty, smoky bar, Coronation Street, but now it's all about mirrors, some swanky glasses, good wine, somewhere you can congregate. So I would say, to answer your question, I would say kitchens, dining, and even living space as well.
What about bathrooms?
Yeah, bathrooms, I would say. There's just a tick of the box, really. Obviously, it's important to have a bathroom to keep clean, but it wouldn't be on my number one list as a bathroom.
Really? I mean, we've gone through various stages with bathrooms, haven't we? The sort of TVs in your shower and things like that. But again, it's all a bit crass, really, isn't it? I mean, do you really want to stand in your shower washing?
I don't see much. No client over the last 7 years has asked me for one of those. So,
no, popular at one time. And in terms of kitchen, let's take a sort of 2 to 3 bedroom detached house in one of the suburbs. I mean, what would you look to spend on a kitchen to make it spectacular? What sort of money is it?
I think you've got to be sensible on where you spend your money. I wouldn't want to be spending £50,000-60,000 on a 2-bed house. You can find some good kitchen suppliers, and then jazz it up with stone worktops, tap finishes, sinks.
I know I did a house in the country some years ago, and the bones of the kitchen, in other words, the carcasses, and the cupboards and all that I bought from them. But the work surfaces had some really nice wood surfaces actually made by a local carpenter, and sort of combined the two. And I thought actually at the time that worked quite well. So even if you buy a fairly standard carcass and cupboard set, you can pick it up, can't you? You can uplift it.
Yeah, there's one named kitchen supplier that we use, and I've been told that they're the number one carcasses that we can use, and they're just, they're not too expensive, but they are hard wearing.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
I agree with the kitchen being the heart of the home. I think that is what sells it. I think one other point that I think is quite important when people are looking to sell their properties is that first impression as well. Sort of you open the door and that, what's your hallway looking like? Do you have place for your coats and your kids put on their shoes, etc. Yeah. What I also like when you come into a property is actually seeing sort of line of sight through to your kitchen and your garden. So we've installed a lot of sort of Crittall internal doors recently where you've got that, light coming in from the rear into the hallway, you've got the line of sight through to the garden. So I think the hallway is also quite important because that's what gives you that first impression.
I agree with you. I do think the hallway is important, and people do. If you're asked to go into somebody's house and sort of take it on as an estate agent, it's very hard to criticise somebody's home, isn't it? But I think it's essential, really, because it's opening that front door, and if you're confronted immediately with a load of shoes and coats and suitcases and that sort of thing, it's not good. And I always look at the kitchen in terms of judging the cleanliness of the house in a way. If the kitchen,
how tidy is it?
If the kitchen's immaculate, then the rest of it's going to be fine too. And I think that's so important when you're trying to sell a property, isn't it? Presentations in everything.
Yeah, I think as a developer as well, that first entry point into the hallway through the front door, if it's not snagged well as well, if people find something as they enter, they're more likely to be looking out for certain things as they go through the rest of the house through the viewing. So you have to make sure that entrance is, there's no dents or nicks or bad paintwork and patches, etc.
I mean, I think the agents today are a lot more switched on to this, and that's as a result of, I suppose, video tours of people's houses and everything. It really is about presentation, isn't it? It's half of the battle. Okay, right, fine. Ben, with the current shortage of homes and little hope of a short-term improvement in the situation, would the experts think that the immediate construction of modern prefab type homes could be a partial solution?
Yeah, I think it's a partial solution and only that. They're fraught with issues, to be honest. And if you look at the prefab companies that have gone bust over the last couple of years, they're plentiful. Due to financial issues, when you're a developer buying prefab stuff, often you have to pay up front a lot of the time. That doesn't always go down well with your finance lenders. So that the financing of these products and the front end loading of those costs are perceived quite negatively. Also, the quality of them is fantastic. It's all built in a factory environment. That's all great. But there's a huge amount that have struggled over the last couple of years to the point where I wouldn't put much trust in certainly some of the smaller outfits to cope with your scheme. I think the first thing I would be looking at if I am going down the prefab route is longevity. Has this company been in and around for a long, long time? And I'd probably be willing to pay a little bit more for that, for the comfort of actually it getting delivered in the first place. A developer friend of mine up in St Albans has recently, as in last week, put some modular loft extensions on one of his flats, and he went down that route because of speed and the cost of running that process. It's taken 15 months to get this loft on, whereas it would have taken 3, maybe 4 if it was just done by a builder. He wasn't sure whether he was going to get them in time. With all of these storms over the last couple of days, he's had all sorts of leaks because they haven't sort of sealed things up correctly. So I think there is a place for it, and a lot of the big house builders will build stick built sort of modular. And I think that's a very, very common way and very successful way of doing it. But the external kind of SIPs panels and the prefabricated panels that get dropped in, I still think there's a long way to go before they are commonplace.
We were talking off camera in the break about I've seen on TikTok and numerous social media platforms these prefabricated I don't know what you call them, prefabricated homes that built in China that look absolutely amazing. They come furnished, they come wired, with air conditioning, with every bit of kitchen equipment you could think of, sofas, beds, all the rest of it. They come over in a container, and a super looking product, which is the equivalent perhaps say of a 1-bedroom flat of I'd say 250, 300 square feet, or maybe a little bit more, for £35,000 plus, I think if I remember correctly, about £7,500 shipping cost in a container. And I don't know why somebody doesn't just buy a field and put 100 of these things in, and you've got 100 instant homes for young people at an affordable level. Even if you doubled your money and charged £70,000 for them, still a lot cheaper than anything you can buy here for the same money.
I mean, I guess it comes down to what that land cost is, right? You know, if people can actually find the land available to put those houses in. I think I don't think we're set up in the UK to be installing, you know, having the skilled labour to kind of install those. I mean, it's probably not that difficult. It does look like a bit of a big Meccano set, to be honest, for the most part.
But these things come over readily completed, and all you have to do is crane them onto sort of four corner blocks of concrete. I mean, the installation would be very, very easy.
Yeah.
But again, I'd be very much in favour of the sort of thing you get a lot in the Middle East, where the government will take a site, it will put all the infrastructure in terms of gas, electricity, drainage, water, all that sort of thing, and then say to developers, right, how much of this would you like to buy? You know, it's ready to go. You're ready to put your product on top. I mean, I quite like that idea.
That would be great if it cuts out the utilities process, because that is another big sticking point for developers. The time it takes to get all of those services in is mind-boggling.
I suppose so. James, anything to add to all that?
It sounds all too good to be true, really.
It does really,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, in the back of my mind, I've got township.
But you know, if we go back to COVID, we were sort of trying to do all sorts of things in Excel to get an instant hospital. Chinese were building a modular hospital within a couple of weeks. I mean, to house.
I think it's down what we said earlier about the planning process. The process here is very much red tape, whereas China, they just throw these flats.
I think it's just a sort of Nike attitude, isn't it? Let's do it.
Yeah.
I think that's the.
I'd imagine their health and safety isn't quite as rigorous and rigid as we are in the UK as well, which is getting ever more increasingly difficult to cope with as well.
I suppose so. Well, there we are, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we've got time for in this show. So a big thank you to James Gostelow. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
And to Ben Richards. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.